Welcome everyone to Solar Oregon's How to Go Solar and Storage. My name is Nicole and I will be giving the presentation today. I am a program manager at the nonprofit Solar Oregon. This is a reoccurring workshop that we've been delivering to home and business owners for over 15 years at Solar Oregon. Our mission is to arm you as the consumer with the information you need so you can make good and informed choices as you decide to go solar or explore solar and home battery storage. And solar has been increasing in Oregon, which is really exciting, and it does work here. So really, really great to see more folks being able to access solar, and we will cover those basics here today. So the agenda for today will be first looking at how solar works. We'll also look at the basics of home battery storage. And we'll look at some ways you can look at your home and see if it is right for solar or home battery storage. We'll also talk about the different incentives that are currently available, and those do change pretty frequently. So it's just important to keep that in mind in your solar journey. And we'll also talk about how you can get started and how you can select a contractor. Solar Oregon is a 501c3 nonprofit that has worked to encourage solar and storage adoption throughout Oregon for over 45 years. We do this by providing reliable and impartial consumer education. We also host tours and showcases so people can see solar in action. And we also perform some policy advocacy and then host Solarize campaigns as well. And then we have a green energy series that explores new technologies in renewable energy and other topics related to solar, and that happens monthly. We're a member-based nonprofit, so thank you to all of our existing members for your support as it helps allow us to work towards our mission and continue to offer free education on solar and home battery storage. Members receive special discounts to our annual events like our Solar Winery Tour, which we just had in May during Oregon Wine Month, which was really great to see how some local wineries are using solar. And then we have our Go Zero Tour coming up in October. And then we also appreciate sponsorships and direct donations. So if you're interested, you can find us at solaroregon.org and consider supporting or becoming a member today. I'm going to put some important resources in the chat. These are just going to be some helpful links to solar bid tools, to our website, to upcoming events, as well as resources on community solar. And then here are some of those upcoming events that we've got this week. We have a couple showcases. One is focusing on Girls Build and highlighting the work they do to teach girls about engineering and solar concepts, which they can take with them into different types of work and have that exposure so they feel comfortable in those spaces. And then we also have another showcase focusing on solar at Portland Public Schools. So you can find those on our Eventbrite and our website, and those are coming up this week. So hopefully we can see you there as well. This workshop is supported by Energy Trust of Oregon, and Energy Trust is an independent nonprofit that was established in 2002, and they provide resources that help enable customers of investor-owned utilities in our state to use energy efficiently and also gain access to renewable energy. They offer key incentives, which we'll talk about in this presentation, that can help make it easier to access solar and home battery storage. And they also have some other incentives for energy efficiency items such as heat pump water heaters and things like that as well. So thank you, Energy Trust. During this webinar, if you have any questions that come up about solar or home battery storage, please use the Q&A It's located in your menu, and you can just throw those questions in there. After this presentation, we'll be doing a Q&A session so that we can work to get those questions answered. And then right before we get started here, we're gonna go ahead and do a couple polls so we can learn a little bit more about you. And this also helps us to make sure our education is reaching different folks throughout Oregon. So I'll go ahead and start those polls now. And we'll also have another poll at the very end of the presentation to see how we did here today. So I'm launching that first poll. Oh, sorry, that was the last poll. Let's retry that. I'm gonna launch the first poll, which is basically, where are you joining from today? Thank you for those answers. And we'll go ahead and launch the next poll, which is about demographics. I'm seeing some of those answers coming in, so I'll go ahead and launch the third poll here, which is just to see what your familiarity is with Energy Trust incentives. And these did increase recently, so it's good to know about them and just keep in the loop on them so you know what you can access if you're looking to install solar and storage. Great. Thank you everyone for that feedback. We greatly appreciate it. And we'll just jump right into this presentation here. So first, we're just going to talk about system components. This is a simple diagram here that just shows a home in the center. And then you can see on the left side, the photovoltaic panel or PV panel. And that is where you can get that DC or direct current electricity from the sun. But our homes use AC, so it's got to go to an inverter or microinverter to get converted from DC to AC, and then it can flow into your home to be used by the devices you have in your home and outlets there via the electrical panel. And then if you produce more electricity than you use, that'll actually flow back out onto the grid. And so you'll have a special meter called a bidirectional meter that'll measure that flow of electricity out back to the grid. And also, if you have times where your production is low, you can pull from the grid. So that meter will measure what you pull or import from the grid as well. And then this is a closer look at those inverters. So you can see the inverter or string inverter is usually somewhere close to your system, maybe on the exterior of your home. And then there's also another option called microinverters. And those are smaller and they would be attached to the back of the panel and could be attached to 1 to 3 panels, depending on the type. And so both of these do work well. It's just going to depend on the needs of your system, and maybe the contractor you choose specializes in one over the other. So just something to keep in mind. Also, there's different types of mounting for solar. The most common in residential areas is going to be roof mounting. It's usually less expensive since you have less materials that you need to do, like conduit runs to connect to those ground-mounted solar systems. We'll see ground-mounted oftentimes in agricultural settings. And then there's also solar roof tiles, which we'll see more of as that technology is becoming more accessible. So these ones here, I think are the Tesla roof tiles. And so these are not just panels, they're also roofing materials. So they get installed similar to a roof. And they can be more expensive. So that's something to keep in mind there. And if you are thinking about solar roof tiles, when you look for contractors, you want to make sure that they have experience installing those. Sometimes there's special certifications to be a solar roof tile installer. So you just want to make sure that they have a good reputation installing those and it's not their first solar roof tile project. All right, so in Oregon, we have net metering. And so this is a process that allows you to account for energy you export to the grid so that you can gain credit for it. And this is important because it can help you build up credits during those sunny summer months that you can access during the winter months when your production is lower. So here we have two graphs illustrating this. So you can see in the summer month, you would be gaining credit because you're probably going to produce more solar and then you're actually going to consume since the solar resource is higher. And so that green arrow in between those two bars is showing the net metering credit earned, and that would show up on your bill. The winter month is showing what might happen when we have less sun during those winter months. And so your production of solar is lower and you would need to pull from the grid. And so that red arrow is illustrating that. So the next slide here shows what it might look like on your energy bill. So you can see the meter readings for the net consumption as well as the excess generation. So here you have a billable kilowatt hour of 0, and that is because you actually generated more than you consumed. So you actually were an exporter this month. And so that export amount would be added to your banked excess generation or your credits, which we can see towards the bottom of this example. And so then you can pull from those credits later in those winter months when you need to import from the grid. You might be asking, why is this bill not 0? Well, it's still a grid-tied system. So there are connection fees that you would still pay each month, but it is a lot smaller than the average bill. So net metering really helps in accessing that bill savings. And then system size. So solar is highly modular and residential solar systems vary widely in size. And system size is measured in kilowatts, and the average residential size is about 8 kilowatts. But that doesn't mean you can't have a system that's smaller than 8 or larger. There is a cap on how big you can go. But really, the important thing is you're going to be wanting to match your installation to how much electricity you consume. So that would be a conversation you'd have with your contractor where they could look at your energy bills. And then you could talk about other factors, such as if you have an EV or are looking to add an EV, if you expect any differences in your energy consumptions, things like someone new moving in or someone moving out can impact your energy consumption. So those are things you're going to want to discuss with your contractor. And then good things to know is that sometimes HOAs might try to limit solar in the HOA. It's good to know that it's illegal in Oregon for the HOA to tell you that you can't go solar, but they can definitely place restrictions on how you go solar. So maybe what roof, side of the roof it's on, if it gets street facing, things like that. So that's an important thing to consider as well if you are in an HOA. And then some other factors to help you decide if your home is right for solar are going to be solar access. So first, you're going to need access to the sun. And so here you can see South-facing roofs are going to have the most access to the sun. So if your south-facing roof is shaded or blocked in some way or isn't able to have solar installed, sometimes they'll install on the other side. So even like the east and west sides of your roof, but usually no solar will be installed on the north side, just as that gets the least amount of solar access. So talked a little bit about shade. So even if you do have that perfect south-facing roof, if you do have a lot of shade, your home probably won't be the best for solar, but there are programs such as community solar where you can be part of a larger solar installation that is not on your property, and you can subscribe to that and still get savings on your bill and also be part of renewable energy. So that's something to look for if you are interested and unable to go solar. Roof complexity also plays a role in your ability to go solar. So you can see a simple roof here is going to be a lot easier to install an array on. If you have a very complex roof or a very steeply pitched roof, that can make it harder to go solar. And possibly the most important thing is going to be your roof condition and age. The life of the system of those panels is usually around 25 years. So it's good to have 20 plus years of life left on your roof. So if you just installed a new roof, that's a great time to go solar, because then that life of the roof and your panels are going to line up. That doesn't mean you can't go solar if you have at least 10 plus years life. Maybe it's still the right choice for you, but that is definitely something you could chat with about a contractor. But it's important to know that roof age does impact that. And if you're looking to re-roof soon, maybe you wait until you re-roof so then you can install solar. You can update your roof, even if you have solar on it, but you're going to have to uninstall the solar to make any repairs or get a new roof and then reinstall it. And so that incurs those extra costs and labor to uninstall and reinstall. So that's why trying to line up that life of the roof and life of the panels is going to save you money in the long run. And let's see. Another thing is rafters and trusses. So some older homes will just have rafters and maybe the spacing doesn't meet code for installing panels. So that's something to keep in mind. It doesn't mean you can't install solar. Maybe you just need some additional engineering or supports in order to add solar to your roof. And your contractor will be able to make that assessment and could also help bring in an engineer. If there is engineering that is needed, that can sometimes add $2,000 to $3,000. So important to keep in mind. If your home has trusses, usually that's in a lot newer homes. And so that tends to meet the strictest codes to install solar. And when thinking about solar, it's important to also think about home battery storage. It's a way for you to store some of that excess energy that you produce and be able to pull on it when you need. And so it's also important for energy resilience. So as we get outages here in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest, thinking about how to keep the lights on is becoming important for a lot of communities. And so having that battery can help increase your energy resilience and access energy and power when there is an outage. So solar and battery storage are complementary technologies. Solar makes the battery more effective by recharging it, and your battery allows you to access your solar independently from the grid. And here's a look of what, or an example of what home battery storage plus solar might look like. So oftentimes the batteries are installed in a garage, sometimes in the basement if you're in Northeast. And then as well as they can be installed at the exterior of the house as well. So power outages vary in their causes and frequency and their duration. Frequent short outages could be from storms and squirrels. In some areas, there are slightly longer outages in the summer months that are caused by red flag weather conditions, where the fire danger is high, and so they do what's called a public safety power shutoff. We first saw that in 2020 here in Oregon, and these events are expected to increase as fire danger increases in the Pacific Northwest. And then here we also have the possibility of the Cascadia earthquake. And so when that happens, there's a chance that we will be without power for a longer duration, and especially if you're in more rural areas. So when thinking about that too, sometimes people will install not just one battery, but a few so that they have more energy in storage. When it comes to picking a battery, there are many good products in the market. Battery technology is getting updated as the need for more batteries and more efficient batteries is growing. So with that, you can do nickel, magnesium, cobalt, which is usually a lower price. There's also the lithium iron phosphate batteries. There's also lead acid batteries. So when thinking about batteries, it's important to think about what the needs are for your system and what you're looking to accomplish with that battery, and have that conversation with your contractor. Most batteries are between 10 and 14 kilowatt hours of capacity, and some manufacturers make smaller units or larger units. And it's oftentimes people will pair more than one battery so that they can have that additional capacity. It is important to know that when you have batteries, multiple batteries, you can't mix and match brands. So if you are with a certain brand of battery, you'll want to stay with that if you have additional brands of batteries so that your system can function more effectively. And to back up your entire home for a long amount of time, you would need many batteries to do that. So it's very important to set your expectations on what a battery can do and what it cannot do. Even if you don't use a lot of electricity, a single battery will usually not back up an entire home for a very long time. So you could do what's called a partial home backup. And in this scenario, certain circuits in your home will receive power from the battery, but the rest of your home will lose power during an outage. So if you're able and willing to front the extra cost, or if energy resilience is really important to your goals, you can look into doing something like a partial backup. And then for partial backups, sometimes they'll install an additional essential loads panel or critical loads panel. And that'll just have those breakers that you decide to back up moved there so they could be connected to the battery. There are also some other options on the market now with new technology, such as smart electric panels, where you can just have one panel and then be able to flex your loads and make those changes. So battery sizing really just depends on two important questions. So what needs power when there's an outage in your home, and for how long does that need power? So you'll be having that conversation with your contractor. Items most frequently chosen to be backed up include a refrigerator to keep foods from spoiling, lights in a common area, and then a couple outlets that you can charge laptops and cell phones. And then if you're interested in installing a battery, when you install can affect both the system design and the price. So if you decide to install at the same time, usually the system is designed to incorporate that battery. If you have existing storage or just decide to do storage first and then look to add the battery later, sometimes your system will need to be reconfigured to accommodate the battery. But there are some great new battery incentives, which have made batteries more accessible. And so we'll talk about those a little bit later. And then it's important to know that batteries do require space. So you can't just shove them in a crawl space. They have to meet the National Electric Code. And so not all systems require as much equipment as in this photo, but it's just important to know that there'll need to be space to install your system. And then incentives, so the exciting bit. So there is the solar investment tax credit. So this is a dollar for dollar tax credit that you would get when you are applying for your taxes. So you wouldn't get that as an out-of-pocket cost savings, but it would come back to you later as a tax credit. And it's 30% for both solar and for storage. So if you just do solar, if you just do storage, or if you do both, it's 30%. And then some important things to know is we are not a tax professional, and we're just trying to inform you about this incentive so that you know about it and can take advantage of it. But it's really helpful to get the advice of a tax professional so you can make sure you're claiming this credit properly. There's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation on the internet about what can be claimed and what cannot for this tax credit. And most common is that re-roofing costs can be claimed, which is false. There are, though, some programs right now that are trying to help folks with re-roofing costs. So that is good to look into. Programs like Programs.ah and being able to see if you can get roofing cost help in other areas. But usually it's not covered in the ITC or solar income tax credit. And then there's also incentives from Energy Trust of Oregon. And these are going to be applied for by your contractor. And you have to use a trade ally contractor in order to access these. So you can see there's ones for solar and storage, depending if you're a PGE or Pacific Power customer. These were both increased recently, so it's nice to see that there is more of an incentive here so folks can help reduce those out-of-pocket costs. So for solar, it's $1,000 for PGE and $1,200 for Pacific Power. And then for storage, it's $500 per kilowatt hour up to 6,000. So say you had a really massive battery and it could get you a lot higher incentive off of that because of the kilowatt hour number. It does max out at 6,000. So that's good to keep in mind. Energy Trust also has a Solar Within Reach program that can help folks access higher incentives and reduce installation costs. So for example, a household of 4 would qualify for Solar Within Reach if their total income was less than $120,252. You can find the cutoff for those household sizes on the Energy Trust website. And I'm going to go ahead and just repost those resources in the chat for anybody who might have joined late, so that you can see those, and I'll repost them again at the end as well. So that's another incentive that can greatly help you if you are income qualified. And then why do these costs vary for solar? Well, we talked about it a little bit with the systems being highly customizable, but there's also if you need special engineering to support the weight of solar per code, or if you need re-roofing, and then also how much access to incentives you get. So incentives do change frequently. So that's important to keep in mind if you're like, oh, wow, these incentives look really great right now. They don't stay there forever. So if that looks like something that's workable for you, it's good to keep in mind in your timing and planning that those do change. And then the reasons that storage vary in costs, it's going to depend on what type of battery you get, the brand, and how many batteries you decide to install. If you have a second essential loads panel installed, or if you install a smart electric panel, as well as those access to incentives. And the incentives for battery have increased. So that's really exciting to see. As solar and storage just complement each other so well and really help with that energy resilience piece. Now we're going to look at some example budgets. So these are just example numbers. This can vary based on your project. Here we're just assuming an 8 kilowatt solar installation at about $32,000 for installation. And then we've shown the incentive amounts based on customer type. You can see in the column, and then how that reduces your out-of-pocket. So for all of these, you can see you can reduce your out-of-pocket from $1,000 to $7,200, depending on which incentives you're able to access. And then everyone can access the federal tax credit as long as they have tax liability. So if you don't have tax liability, then you wouldn't get the tax credit. So that's another important factor to keep in mind. This tax credit can be claimed over a few years. So if you don't have the full tax liability to make up for it in that 1 year, it's nice that you can extend it out for a few years. So that helps get that full credit. But yes, please check with a tax professional just to make sure you're accessing the most of it that you can. And then you can see final savings with the incentives and tax credit. If you're able to access both of those, you're bringing your cost down by $10,000 or even by $15,000 for your cost for that installation. So that's why incentives can be super helpful. We'll look at now an example for solar plus storage. And so here we're assuming an 8 kilowatt solar system and a 13 kilowatt hour home battery storage. And so with that, your cost before incentive is going to be higher because you're adding that battery. And then you are adding it at the same time in this scenario. If you do add it later, which we'll look at that scenario next, it can increase your cost by a few $1,000s if there's design changes that need to happen, things like that. And so here you can see, because you can access both solar and storage incentives, that can help you get a higher incentive amount, so ranging from 7,000 all the way over to 20,000 in incentives to help your out of pocket, depending on your customer type. And then also we're showing that federal tax credit as well. That would be something you apply for when you do your taxes. And then this last scenario is if you added storage later. So it shows $3,000 extra just for, adding that battery storage later. We do have people who already have existing solar systems and they just want to add just storage. So if that's your scenario, you can just look at row 2 and that's a ballpark of what a battery might cost. And this can vary based on sizing, brands, if the solar contractors have different deals that you can access. So that's something to keep in mind there. And then you can see again, you get the energy trust incentive depending on what customer type you are, and that can reduce that out of pocket. And then when you apply for your taxes, you would want to apply for the federal tax credit, which again, you can apply for if you have solar, if you decide to get storage, if you get those separately, or if you just add storage to a system. And because solar and battery storage entail a large upfront cost, Many homeowners utilize financing, so there are options out there for that. You can obtain a loan through a bank, which you already have an existing relationship with. Not all banks will offer loans for solar and storage, so that's something you're going to want to check out and not just bank on. And then your contractor might also have a credit union partner or financing option that you can access. And these types of loans may allow you to refinance when you claim the ITC, which is that federal income tax credit, which can help minimize the total interest you owe. So note that the interest payments on your loan will not qualify for the tax credit though. And as with any major financial decision, carefully assess your options, make sure you read the fine print, and yeah, if you have access to a finance professional, that's great. Not all of us have access to that, so just make sure you're comparing multiple options and what their terms are for the loan so that you are setting yourself up for success if you're as you pay it off. And how do you get started? So saw the webinar, maybe you already have done your own research and you're ready for those next steps. Well, we talked a little bit about trade allies. And so the trade allies are qualified and vetted, and you can find them on Energy Trust website. They are familiar with incentives to apply for Energy Trust for solar and storage. And to access Energy Trust incentives, you need to work with a trade ally. So it's a great incentive right now. So definitely recommend working with a trade ally. And then they usually are pre-vetted, have good reputations. Yeah, and they oftentimes are more customer focused than some of the larger non-trade ally brands. And I'm just going to repost the links to all of those resources, and they have the link to the solar bid tool. And so, like I mentioned earlier, those incentives vary depending on what type of customer you are. In those budgets, it showed LMI. And so LMI is low to moderate income. So those are income qualified incentives. So it's going to be based on what your household income is to see if you can access that additional incentive. And then here's kind of just a reminder to check out Energy Trust's website because they have a solar bid tool. And so that's a great next step if you're like, okay, I want to meet contractors now. I already kind of know the basics. This is something that I want to dive a little deeper into, have someone assess my site and see what my options are for an installation design and pricing. So that's a great place to go for that, is to use that bid tool on Energy Trust website, because it goes through and will work to get you up to 3 bids from trade ally contractors. So they're already connected to those trade allies and can help connect you with them. And it just depends with how many quotes you receive back on what service area you're in and what installers are available in that area. And then once you've selected your contractor, they'll come out, assess your site. They should set up a quote for you that's free. And if you can, get at least 3 quotes so that you can compare those and see what option works best for you and your household. Once you pick one that works for you, you'll sign a contract, and then here's kind of what you can expect for timing for the rest of the process. The contractor will complete the paperwork for the incentive and for the interconnection. They do not do the paperwork for the tax credit. That's a tax professional or yourself. Permitting can take 2 to 12 months. In Multnomah County, it's definitely a longer permitting. They're trying to work on reforming that and make it shorter, but just set your expectations. If you are in a higher population area, usually there's more permitting delays. So keep that in mind. We have seen permitting delays decrease in some areas. So yay for that. But it's just good to set your expectations that sometimes the paperwork takes time. Installation is usually 1 to 2 days, depending on your site and the difficulty of the install or design. And then the contractor will manage the inspections and interconnections. And once you are interconnected, you will be producing clean, renewable energy right at your own home that you can access for your home. And we're just going to jump right into the Q&A now. I think I was able to answer one of the questions during the presentation. And then another question came in. Is there also a state of Oregon incentive? So we used to have a state rebate, but those funds have been used already. And so that's again just going back to incentives change. So the state rebate is not available right now, but they are looking to try to get more funding for that program. So it could come back later. We just don't have a timeline on that. And we don't know exactly when or if it'll happen, but something to definitely keep in mind.